I wanted to borrow Ms. Lachamp's words that finance is a tool for addressing inequality at the nexus of gender and climate, but we do know that the same gender norms that shape the inequality, in terms of the challenges women face for climate change, also limit women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment opportunities. So we're talking today in the session, we have three great speakers who will talk to us about how do you understand how gender norms shape opportunities for women, and then how can financing as a tool in combination with behavior change approaches begin to address this. We have Natalia from HEDERA, who will talk to us about their approach to gathering insights. And then we have Lucas and Rebecca from GIZ and GOGLA, who will talk a little bit about digital inclusive, green inclusive finance, and then the opportunity presents. And then finally, we'll hear from Emma Etchells about some of the work they've been doing with Shamba Shakeup and using edutainment for behavior change. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Natalia to get started. Over to you. You have 10 minutes and hopefully you'll keep to time.
Yes. Thank you, Nisha. And welcome everybody. Very excited to be here today, sharing with you our approach, our work at HEDERA Sustainable Solutions, fostering behavioral change to address climate change in microfinance. Let's get started. So we are a social tech company. We are based in Berlin, and we are specialized in digital solutions for green inclusive finance. That means we work with microfinance institutions and also impact investors. We provide them with tools for needs assessment and financial product design. That will be the core of today. We also support them in their impact data management and digitizing processes, providing also digital or virtual training. More or less like not giving our passion to digital solutions for the microfinance sector that still are very eager to work more with data for enhancing climate resilience. Next. So our approach is we provide them, we have surveys for conducting household-based or medium enterprises analysis, and we provide them with QR code for accessing surveys. We get the data and provide them with digital dashboards and all the analysis, and support them in the whole product or green finance product design. And for this, next, what we do with these surveys is we bring these international standards that have been developed for measuring access, or the approach for measuring the achievements in SDG 7, 6, 2, 5, 13 for the microfinance sector. So we are like already surveys and indicators that have been standardized, that are applicable to everywhere in the world, at household base and also institutional base in the case of environmental performance. And the idea is to optimize them in order that any loan officer or sales staff or enumerators, we can train them on how to do the data collection and get a very detailed picture of what are the needs at household base. Next. And what we have seen from these surveys, we take in each of the surveys, we identify which questions can give us insights of the vulnerability to climate change, also to health vulnerability. And in all of the assessments that we have conducted on all these projects, we see the data reflects exactly what we were discussing at the beginning of today's session. Women are mostly responsible for the cooking fuel and water collection. They are the most affected overall, especially when cooking. They have limited time and opportunities, given that they are in charge of the household, of the water collection, food collection. They have fewer appliances for productive uses that compared to men. And overall, especially in microfinance sector, we are used to see the numbers. We have that many amount of women as clients, but this does not reflect women empowerment. And the appeal is to understand what are those metrics and frameworks in order to measure women empowerment and make sure that by enabling access to services, by enhancing climate resilience, we can also enhance women's empowerment. Next. Over the years, since we have started providing these tools to microfinance institutions, we have worked with several institutions in Latin America, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and also South Asia. We have interviewed more than 10,000 households and micro, small, medium enterprise. I am having MSMEs, and what we have seen is the value that are giving these very detailed studies, also using open source software tools, and empowering their staff to do by themselves this very in-depth overview and having a look. Like, it's not only about giving the loan or giving the non-financial service, but also asking, what are your pains? Tell me, what are your needs? Have you seen that have the recent events, climate events, or resources have been affected in your area? And when you have the loan officer is the face of the microfinance institution to the client, suddenly they realize, I am also the problem solver to this household, to this entrepreneur. Let me discuss this with my branch manager, with the institution, and see how can we develop solutions, but not only from one experience, but with the data from the whole institution that is collected, or from the sample that has been collected. Next. So this, I'm going to bring you two examples. One is from the microfinance institution in Senegal, Fansoto, that it's from Entrepreneur du Monde. After the data collection, they saw the dependency of the women in wood and also in coal, with very poor, very, very bad conditions for the cooking services that they were having. And they decided to develop a financial product that tackled credit in order to access improved cook stoves. They tested several cook stoves, also surveyed different suppliers in the region, in the areas where they were gathering the information. And finally, last year, like end of last year, they have completed the pilot phase, and now they have launched the product. The next one example is from Sustainable Villages Foundation in Rwanda, which after the needs assessment, they have targeted or organized their plan of action and established priorities. We are going to focus on water access and also on electrification using microfinance mechanisms, and partnering with energy suppliers, in this case with Energy Access, and having local saving groups to have access to electricity for the households in the villages that they were working. And with these experiences, we wanted to share with you some key facts from the approach that we work with. And the first one is, we are convinced that only those detailed studies can help microfinance institutions identify the priorities and behavior of their communities and see by themselves, with their loan officers, with their branch managers, what are the struggles of their clients. And by interviewing clients are very, as I said, like it's around a 1 hour that they spend with client by client. They understand how to foster this behavioral change. They identify what are local solutions if one household has one cook stove or one system or what technology that the other households don't have. And they find out who were the suppliers, how did you get access to that, or to a sustainable agriculture practice, identify leaders and engage to cooperate among themselves, and the value of data that is given to microfinance institutions in order to design their products and design their green finance programs based on data and also monitor over time. Ilofem in Burundi told us our communities are vulnerable to climate change and they have very poor infrastructure. Like if you see the region where they work, they don't know where to start. And by only having this data, they see, okay, here there is willingness to pay. here there is ability to pay. So let's start in addressing those needs. And my last message to close is we have one webinar series that we're launching next week on February 15. It's 4 sessions from GOGLA, UNCGF, GIZ, and ESMAP from the World Bank. We're having this webinar series that will be starting next week, and we want to invite you to participate, exploring the relationship between energy access, microfinance, and women empowerment. I will share the link. I had a slide, but unfortunately it's not there. We will be sharing the news with you over FinEquity and also over FinDev. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Natalia, for walking us through the approach of better understanding women's realities and how that can inform the solutions that are designed. I'm now going to invite Lucas Keller from GIZ and Rebecca Rhodes from GOGLA, who will together talk about digital green inclusive finance and the opportunity of embedding a gender lens into PAYGO in expanding access to energy, so clean energy. Lucas, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Nisha. And just making sure that you can hear me well. Yes,
yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's connected to this session. I'm joining you from Berlin this morning. And yeah, let me first start by saying and extending our gratitude to the FinEquity team for organizing this event, and yeah, for providing us with the opportunity to speak about our views at GIZ Financial Systems Development on the important topic of digital green inclusive finance, especially as it relates to women's economic empowerment. Before handing to our partner GOGLA and specifically Rebecca to speak more about kind of the promise of PAYGO and off-grid solar energy for women's economic empowerment and inclusive transition. So my name is Lucas Keller, and I'm an advisor with the Financial Systems Development and Insurance Sector Program at GIZ, where our main focus really is to provide direct, high-level strategic advice to the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, on its financial system development strategy in line with the current foci of the German government. So as we all are acutely aware and just heard, also women in developing countries are among the hardest hit by climate change, facing unique challenges that exacerbate the impacts of climate change. Women in these economies are often responsible for the majority of household chores, including fetching water, cooking, and caring for their families. And climate change exacerbates these already challenging tasks. We can think about droughts and water scarcity, which make it difficult to access the resources that they need. And in addition, extreme weather events such as floods and hurricanes can cause damage to homes and disrupt families' livelihoods. So as a result, women are forced to spend even more time and resources trying to secure basic necessities. So enabling access to clean energy solutions, we believe, can alleviate some of the problems faced by low-income women and men in developing countries, while at the same time support a green energy transition, as well as catalyze economic growth and reduce overall poverty. Yet a problem that we see is that in many countries, there's a lack of financing options, which constitutes a major barrier to clean energy access, especially among women-led businesses and households. So if we can go to the next, I think we jumped a few slides to the second slide of my deck. Yeah, here we go. Thank you. So at GIZ Financial Systems Development, we seek to combine a multitude of approaches to demonstrate how enabling a transition to net zero goes beyond, but cannot go without finance. So in essence, our work is still about financial inclusion, but we want to locate its benefits within a broader value chain of mutually reinforcing parts, such as access to energy and finance, gender, as well as digital technologies. Because we believe that all of these are required to really make a difference. So accordingly, we've come up with, albeit drawing on previous work by other organizations, especially of the Center for Financial Inclusion, CFI, we came up with the Digital Green Inclusive Finance Framework as our frame of reference. So if we can go to the next slide. So DGIF, Digital Green Inclusive Finance, has for us as its core 3 core components. So first, digital, which really enables reach and scalability. Green, to promote climate resilience and sustainability, and inclusivity, to ensure equality and proportionality. So in that way, this framework goes, embodies 2 out of the 4 development priorities of the current German government, namely ensuring a just transition towards net zero and pursuing a feminist development policy. Yeah, we think that to change mindsets, not only of policy and decision makers, we need to be digital by default, green by default, and inclusive by default, which this DGIF framework implies. So with this short introduction to our focus when it comes to digital green inclusive finance, let me now hand over to my colleague Rebecca Rose from GOGLA, who will demonstrate in more detail how financial inclusion at the nexus of PAYGO asset financing, off-grid solar products and appliances can contribute to a more just and inclusive future. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucas. And again, just echo his thanks for the invitation to share today. By way of a very short introduction, GOGLA is representing more than 200 members in the off-grid solar industry. And we've been working with GIZ and Nisha actually for the past few months to better understand and define how the pay-as-you-go off-grid solar products and services are supporting this intersection of digital, green and inclusive finance, and contributing to that just feminist transition that Lucas just spoke about. So we know that more than 700 million of the most climate vulnerable people are also energy poor, and a majority of these are also women. And living without access to electricity, they're still dependent on expensive, polluting and traditional fuels. So off-grid solar utilizes digital technologies such as IoT, and it has ever-increasing quality of hardware, and it's also the fastest and cheapest way to reach these 700 million people. And beyond that, I think, you know, pay-as-you-go products are not only a tool for financial inclusion, but they also act as an enabler for better inclusion as well. Next slide, please. So I don't have too much time, so I try to summarize here some of the ways that PAYGO energy products are meeting this digital, green, inclusive finance thesis. So at the most basic level, you know, clean and reliable lighting is helping to extend productive hours, and giving users, gives women the ability to power, you know, mobile phones, radios and televisions, unlocking access to information, education and other digital tools and financial inclusion tools such as online markets. And I think that's particularly important for women who can then access, you know, these new opportunities without the burden of having to go, you know, physically as well, when they have a greater burden of other chores to be doing. Last year we saw in India and Pakistan record-breaking temperatures last year, and this is coming now to the cooling and fan section. So access to efficient solar powered fans is actually really important. So paid for and accessible through digital pay-as-you-go payments are also becoming a vital tool in resilience to climate affected temperatures and avoidance of heat stress. And again, this is something that's especially you know, important for women who spend so much of their productive hours indoors, and they don't have the opportunities to go outside, seek additional shade, seek breeze. And so another way that sort of off-grid solar products can really help. And women are also more likely to occupy these post-harvest roles within the agricultural value chain. And And so access to refrigerators can have a really big impact on reducing food loss and increasing incomes. And we're also seeing a number of really innovative models for inclusion here as well, such as kind of truly pay-as-you-go access, where market vendors will pay per use, per day per use of a communal facility as well. Next slide, please. Excuse me whilst my voice slowly dies as well. So I'll finally just wrap up by sharing more of a little bit of a deep dive into solar water pumps as well. So these are impacting across this mitigation, adaptation, resilience and transition framework. And over 90% of farmers using solar water pumps in East and Southern Africa have reported a better yield and improved income. And it's through the reach and scale of kind of digital financial inclusion that almost 200 million additional farmers could benefit from the improved irrigation, the time savings as well that come on top of that. But we really need to make sure that this kind of tech and other energy, off-grid energy products are reaching all sections of the target market. So how is it marketed? How is it designed? How are the products designed to meet the needs, particularly of the most vulnerable, low income, of women and their particular role in the value chain as well. And really just help their understanding of how these products can benefit them and how they can access them. So before my voice completely goes, I will pass back to Nisha. Hopefully I haven't gone too fast, but you got some interesting use cases there as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thank you, Lucas, for sharing, the opportunity that PAYGO presents. But as Lucas said, the need is to be digital by default, green by default, and inclusive by default, and that can sometimes be a very tall order. I'm now going to invite Emma to share a little bit about some of the work they've been doing on using edutainment to influence behaviors, and then we'll open it up for questions. So think about it. Over to you, Emma.
Great, thanks, Nisha. And thanks for the opportunity for us to connect with the FinEquity community today. Thank you. So I'll start off by explaining a bit about what the Mediae Company does. I'll then go on to explain more about 3 of our different TV productions, Shamper Shape Up, Makatano Junction and Peke Town. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. I think if you click, if you keep clicking. Okay, so at Mediae, we believe that edutainment drives change at scale and is a powerful way to really achieve impact. So all of our programs are based on this edutainment model, which leads to tangible changes in knowledge, attitude, and practice. So our primary target audience is those who have access to a TV. The reason being because they're in the cash economy and therefore most likely able to adapt to the changes being highlighted in our different productions. We partner with both the commercial and the development sector and basically enable an opportunity for them to showcase their products or their research findings and basically offer their solutions to the challenges being highlighted in our TV shows. By delivering educational content in an entertaining way and through real life scenarios and engaging storylines, we feel that people are more encouraged to want to find out more. So we offer opportunities for our audiences to interact with the programs, and we do that through digital mobile-based platforms, a call center, and interactive web-based budgeting tools. Each of our media productions are always concluded by a knowledge, attitude, and practice study. So this is basically to assess if the content being delivered is actually enhancing people's knowledge, bringing about changes in attitude, and most importantly, are people actually adopting the practices we're promoting? It also helps us have more understanding as to what content people want to know about in our productions, and also helps us identify gaps in knowledge within the audience we're targeting. Next slide, please. So Shamber Shape Up is our flagship television program, and it basically showcases in-depth agricultural information to both rural and urban farmers. So essentially, it's a reality makeover show. So we find farmers, they identify problems they're having on their farms. We bring on the experts to help bring solutions to those problems. Our main targets are youth and women. So that's the key criteria when we're selecting farms to feature on the show. iShamber is our digital support service. So that's basically enables viewers to interact with the show, speak with trained agronomists, and if they want to, they can receive weekly agricultural tips, weather forecasts, and market prices. Our growing audience of Shamber Shape Up, I think, really highlights a big gap in information for smallholder farmers. So we began broadcasting the show in 2012 and had around 3 million viewers as our audience. We now have up to 9 million viewers. So it's forever growing. Financial literacy is a topic we've featured on the show since 2012. And last year, so series 12, we partnered with the Women Connect Challenge, with KWFT providing content around financial literacy for women. So some of the topics that came up in the show were around savings, how to save up to get loans for farming, the importance of record keeping, how to make budgets for your farm, and conversations around informal lending institutions such as Chalmers. In addition to the content featured in the show and through the Women Connect Challenge partnership, we also sent out 20 SMSs to all the women on our iShamber database. So these SMSs were basically providing information to women around how to get tools for record keeping, the importance of choosing loans with low interest rates, explaining more about informal saving institutions. So within the time period that the SMSs were sent out to the iShamber database, the female subscribers, so it was between March and September, which is when Shamber Shape Up was being broadcast, we had 35,000 women in that time sign up to iShamber. So I guess a real indication that women, are using their phones to access agricultural information. So if you want to find out more about this topic. We had around 3,000 specific questions on topics. The majority of questions were around tools for record keeping on farms. Around 30% of the questions were focused on loans and 24% on shorts. Through our knowledge, attitude and practice study that we did once the series was over in September, we found some really encouraging findings. So around 7 in 10 smallholder farmers are now making a budget to decide on how to spend their income from their farms. So that suggests to us that smallholder farmers are increasingly operating their farms as a business and making decisions based on sort of sound evidence from income and expenditure rather than just, ad hoc. With regards to financing farm activities, we found that 70% of our viewers said they were financing their farm activities from income derived from the previous season. And viewers were much more likely than non-viewers to finance their farm from their own sources of income rather than go and seek a loan or borrow money from friends and family. Bank accounts, knowledge and attitude around bank accounts seems to have changed quite a lot. When we first started broadcasting the show in 2012, there was a lot of resistance from smallholders around the banking sector, not really believing that they had products available for farmers like themselves. There was also a lot of suspicion around the banking sector and a lot of lack of knowledge and awareness around the benefits of having bank accounts.
However, 12 years later, we can definitely say that people's knowledge and attitudes are changing. Out of our viewers, we found that 3/4 of smallholder farmers are now aware that having a bank account helps you save money, and 2/3 of the audience also knew that it helped build credit worthiness. In all cases, from the research we found, women viewers were as knowledgeable as their male counterparts with regards to information we had been providing in financial literacy. Next slide, please. So, Mpeke Town, this is another one of our TV productions. So it's a drama series that promotes farming as a family business where planning, resource allocation, labour activities are shared out equally amongst the family. And there's also a lot of promotion around fair land ownership. So it's set in a small village in Uganda, and it basically follows the loves, hopes, trials and tribulations of a small village struggling to earn a livelihood. So in partnership again with Women's Connect Challenge, we really wanted to focus on closing that digital divide and increasing women's economic empowerment. So we did this by creating storylines on the show, which sort of using really relatable characters to model positive behaviour and confront perceptions in subtle and non-threatening ways. So, for example, building women's confidence. We wanted to educate women on the use of using technology regularly and sort of giving women the confidence to be able to use it on their own. So one of the storylines we featured on Mpeke Town showed a group of women who were very fearful that the market they were all working in was closing down. One of the women in particular expresses deep concern that they'd no longer be able to make money, and her friend very quickly tells her, well, look over there. All these women know what's happening. They're all now using their mobile phones to market their produce. So sort of really sort of reinforcing, positive role models. Also on the show, we wanted to really promote women in leadership positions. So showing women being elected into positions of leadership by both men and women. And around economic opportunities, so encouraging best practice within agricultural groups. So another storyline featured a women's SACCO, and they were basically saying that if we all save together, we save more. We can then look to go into a producing group by setting up a factory and selling bottled juices. So all of this is done in a very entertaining but informative way. Next slide, please. So another one of our media productions is called Makatano Junction. And this is a really good example of how we've used media to actually change practices. So it's a Kenyan soap opera, and it captures different themes affecting African society. So things we featured on the drama have included corruption, financial education, early marriages, and conflict resolution. So a few years ago, we featured a storyline discussing the value of banking and ran a parallel campaign with a women's banking group called Nawiri Dada, which means Sisters Achieving in Swahili. So low-income, underbanked women in Kenya were encouraged via the TV show and campaign to open and use bank accounts to help them budget, save, and build a financial track record. The campaign was promoted locally through 3 partner banks: Equity, Kenya Women's Finance Trust, and Family Bank. The outcome of this was 138,000 women opened up these bank accounts. So a really good example of how we've used media to sort of get people to change their attitudes and actually put into practice what we're saying on the show. Because of the success of this particular drama series, we really want to produce a spin-off version of this TV series called Makatano Mamas, with issues specifically relevant to Kenyan women, so managing businesses, financial inclusion, and reproductive health. At the same time, we of course want to integrate storylines which are of interest to men. Obviously, that's critically important. Otherwise, you're not going to get the sustainable support for women and their livelihoods. That's the end. I hope I didn't overrun time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Emma. So I thank you everyone for the presentations, and I'm seeing a number of good questions and a lively exchange already happening in the chat. But as moderator, maybe I wanted to get the discussion started and then also weave in some of the questions that we got in from the audience. Rebecca, you could stop sharing your screen and I can maybe ask my panelists if they're okay with turning on their videos for this part of the discussion. So my first question is, this session is titled Influencing, Behaviors to address, and advance gender and climate goals through financial inclusion. Oftentimes when we talk about behavior change, it's limited to the behaviors of women. So, getting women to do things differently or learn a new skill or use a new piece of technology. But I think, the constraints also lie in the system, and we need financial service providers and policymakers and service providers to also be doing things a little bit differently and changing their behavior. So I wanted to get a reflection from the panelists about, do you agree? And what do you think would need to happen for that to, for there to be change in the behavior of all of these other stakeholders as well in financial inclusion? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I would like to, I can go first and also complement to the discussion that has been happening on the chat. Yes. Because I have now, there was a question, but now what is the reaction of the microfinance institutions working directly with the loan officers? And then the other question about now, how is this green financing? What is really the motivation of the institutions? And what we have seen, I've been working in the microfinance sector over a decade, and there are like three lines of action that are like contradictory. One is the impact measurement, where non-stakeholders have been going into less as possible, or let's use the data that they already have. Let's have other approaches or external approaches to the institution to don't bother them with this academic approach that before was in place. Yeah, so that's one line of action. The other one was green inclusive finance, or we called it before green. No, it was energy microfinance, then green finance, now green inclusive finance. Now it will evolve, but it has been tagged as something that it's special, that it's a nice to have, that it's something extra to do. And now we have seen, and as CGAP now is defining a strategy in the next 5 years, it is a must to have. It is not anymore optional. It is something that institutions have to think about, because it is their clients that are the front line, that we need. It's not a solution that everybody leaves the country and lives in an area where they will be resilient to what will happen, but we want not this household and business to be prosperous and then in the future get access to commercial banking, and then having other perspectives of life. And then the next level of action is the relationship the institutions have with the loan officers. As don't touch them. They have they just need to comply with their goals. We have a high rotation rate, and sometimes some institutions have the loan officer just with numbers or with emails, not being part of the institution, not something else. They are the face to the customer, they are not the one bringing my institution to the customer, but something that it's just business based. So what we want to change is this behavior of, we have the loan officers that they can understand directly the needs, based on those needs, develop programs that respond to a business need. As Mrs. Grasa, as she said, think about business. They're not thinking about climate change. Think about, this have to be prosperous for me. This has to make sense for me. And this is not only by understanding that and having the data and being able to monitor and be sure that at the end of my program, I have reached my goal of empowering, or of making more resilient, of having another technology, or having better access to that basic service, I'm sure that I'm doing my work.
Great, thanks, Natalia. Rebecca, I see you turn your camera on. Do you want to add something?
Nothing wholly different, actually, just kind of recognizing that I think when we talk about off-grid solar as well, whilst it's a slightly different model for the pay-as-you-go companies, it's very much the same. It's about kind of mainstreaming the approach to take to make sure that we're including women in throughout the value chain, the sales pitch. Are we reaching them? And I was just drafting a response to one of the questions, actually, about how do we tailor the products and services. And we know that in GOGLA's affiliates, we have around the customer base that are women is about 30%, but that doesn't mean that they are more of them are not the main users of the system. Often the man in the house will purchase the system, but they are not the ones using it, on a day-to-day basis. But from my own experience, I've seen that it's a male agent that goes to install the system. And so the kitchen area is forgotten about and so doesn't have lighting installed. And so the women are then not getting the benefits that they can. So I think it's about, throughout the business models, looking at the ways to kind of mainstream this issue and really just kind of change how we approach it as well.
Great. It's not an either or, it has to be both and lens. I don't know if Lucas, you want to say anything, otherwise I'll move to the next question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, let me just really quickly just mention that I feel, Rebecca said that you really have to look at the business case and kind of the value chain and where you can bring in stakeholders there to kind of also share kind of this burden for change when it comes to changing social norms. But I think, there's also a big role for development actors in particular to provide some sort of subsidies, right, to speak to especially policy decision makers at the policymaker level, at the institutional level, to call and provide incentives maybe that go beyond kind of the immediate kind of business incentives to affect the change that we want to see, by encouraging champions for the topic of women's financial inclusion, maybe changing even laws, right? So that's something I think where development actors can play a particularly strong role, just to mention that.
Great, thanks. So what I hear is, the business case is the biggest motivator for a lot of the private sector actors, if we can demonstrate, and build the evidence around it. And then for, some of the others, like policymakers, there's a role for development actors. Emma, I'm going to come to you with a slightly different question, which comes from the chat, which is around, one of the things, given the use of edutainment for behavior change is relatively new in financial inclusion, there's always questions of, it seems great, but like it's cost prohibitive sometimes, or it sounds that it could be cost prohibitive to run a whole TV show. So one question is, do you see private sector actors willing to cover costs? And then also from your experience, have you seen what kind of messages work best using edutainment? And then there might be other channels that are better for some other messages.
Yeah, so sorry, my internet was a bit unstable, but yeah, so how we work is each episode, for example, of Shamba Shape Up will feature 4 different topics. So each of those topics could be anything from how to get a loan to start, to expand on your farming business. It could be around livestock hygiene, pests and controls, pests and disease of maize. So for each of those segments, they're 5-minute segments, we bring in sponsors. So we work with both the development and the commercial sector, and they will partner with us. So they will pay essentially to be featured on the show. So what we normally say is for every partner that signs up to do 5 segments minimum, so 5 episodes minimum, because we feel that anything less than that just doesn't really get messaging across. What we find is, you know, the more you repeat, the better the uptake. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And specifically on the Makutano Junction, was there any willingness from the banks themselves to pay for it? I think you said that's what you're doing, but just to clarify.
For the banks to pay for this. So my understanding, I wasn't actually here when they ran that campaign, but the banks came on board. I'd have to get more information on exactly how that worked. How that partnership worked. But with regards to most TV series, what we do is we have both development and commercial sectors come on board as paying partners. So a lot of the time, developmental research firms will come in because it's a gateway to disseminate their information, and it's a great way to do it at scale. Yeah,
and this, you know. The other question I had was in terms of the messages that are better suited for this edutainment approach. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think the key thing is to just really simplify it. So we are experts in this area. We have so much content, short videos aimed specifically at smallholder farmers on how to do a budget, how to get a loan. So we incorporate this messaging with lots of graphics, pictures, simplified language. And I can share examples of that after this. So I think any messaging is fine, but it's the way it's delivered that's really, really important. And I think to also show people within the TV programs, women doing it and what the results are. So yes, I got a loan. This is what it meant. This was the interest rate. I now understand what interest rates are. So really trying to convey it that way too.
There was a question about impacts. Like, one is more broadly, how do you measure the impact? And I know you talked about it a little bit in your presentation, if you could mention that. And then if there were any differences, you see any differences, you know, in terms of sex disaggregated, differentiated impacts, do you track that, how they engage? How does that inform your strategy also?
Yeah, sure. So, if we take Shampoo Shape Up as an example, so what we'll do is to measure impact, we do what we call CAP studies. So knowledge, attitude, and practice are measured. So we'll do a baseline before the TV series has aired, and we'll ask potential viewers a series of questions. What's a soil test? You know, what's insurance? Do you know why bank accounts are good, or whatever? Like a series of questions drafted around what content's going to appear in the TV series. So that's the baseline. We then do an end line. So at the end line, we'll do 2 samples, so non-viewers and viewers. And we ask these questions again, and we see what the differences are in then the knowledge, the attitude, the practice. So did people actually take out the bank account? Do people, you know, do you now know what a soil test is? So that's how we gauge impact. Like, is it actually changing people's attitudes? Is it having an impact on their knowledge? And all that data we have will be disaggregated for age, gender, so we can get a better idea as to, you know, where are the greatest gaps in knowledge, or, you know, the best sort of change in attitude, as it were. So that's how we've done it to date. We've also looked more recently at doing some deeper dives. So we did some case studies after the last series, but that was more for people who were active on our iShamba database and had also watched Shampoo Shape Up over at least 5 years. And I think that is when you see the real changes and practices happening and the real results. So people who have been part of this community for a long time, and they're feeding into both the show and the iShamper platform.
Great, thanks. Hopefully that answers the questions. I know there were a few more questions, and we'll try to get answers to them from our panelists. And I'll be doing a report out from this discussion in the form of a blog that will come out in the next few weeks. So I want to say a big thank you to Natalia, Emma, Rebecca, and Lucas for sharing your perspective, for everybody who joined us. Thanks for participating, your questions. Be on the lookout for the blog, and continue to engage with FinEquity. As we said, it can't be either or. You have to, financial inclusion is a tool for women's empowerment and addressing climate change. And we all need to continue to work together to, influence behavior change. So look forward to continued engagement. Thanks, everyone, and see you tomorrow for part 2 of FinEquity 2023. Don't forget.